Alrighty, okay, everybody settle down. Let's get started here. Back with another video today. Everybody's favorite topic. We're going to talk about cutting a little bit, right? The old trimming down, slimming down, getting the beach bod, that sort of thing. Let's jump right into it, all right? So, this is going to piggyback a little bit off of my prior nutrition video that I made last week. And this is going to be for people that should cut or would like to cut. There's a difference there. But let's talk about them, all right? So, when to cut, / who should cut. And this is, again, I'm sticking with the regular MF topic, right? You and I, okay? So this video is not for like weight class athletes, right? Because they like to cut, right? It's not for powerlifters. It's not for BJJ athletes. It's not my area of expertise. Sorry, can't help you there. All right, this is for Jim, who would like to become Slim Jim. Slim relatively in terms of body fat percentage, but with a high percentage of lean mass, Jim. So these people, right, who should be cutting? The first category we have people with an immediate health concern, right? Let's say you went to your doctor, you got your A1C checked, you're a guy, a young dad, and you're 41 years old, right? A1C comes back, it's like, 6.1, a little bit high, a little bit elevated, right? Doctor says, this is kind of the pre-diabetic range. Your body is in dire straits right now. You're a little fluffy, right? If you're not already training, like training alone might honestly bring that down into a healthy range. So start with that. But I'm talking like pre-diabetes, right? We're not talking diabetic. Pre-diabetes intervention right here, okay? As an example. Or if you have like, history of heart disease maybe, you're kind of getting into like the risk range, like you're a guy, you're, in your mid 40s, it's usually where it starts to become a thing, like 45 and onward. The doctor wants to put you on a bunch of meds or whatever. Your blood work isn't looking great, you're a little out of shape, you're a little fluffy, you could gain some ground there. That's who should be cutting, all right? I think I've driven that home. The second category, someone who is a little too fluffy. Notice the asterisk right here, right? So they're fluffy, but with conditions, right? They're fluffy, but they've been training a decent amount, right? And they're still kind of fluffy. So if you're completely untrained and you're skinny fat, you're not too fluffy, you're just under-muscled, right? And unfortunately, you're probably going to go from that to being too fluffy by the end of your NLP if you do it properly. That's just part of the drill. Been there myself. Nothing you can really do about that, right? That's just your unfortunate situation. If you start from like 28% body fat, skinny in clothing, right? You're going to put on some body fat through the NLP, but you're also going to gain a ton of lean mass, and then you can very easily lose the fat afterwards relative to gaining that lean mass. So prioritize gaining your lean mass, right? If you haven't gone through the NLP, give that all you got. And then I also recommend like a little bit of intermediate programming as well. So my preference, ideally, if you're going to do a cut, you're at least like bi-weekly intermediate by this point, where you're adding weight. You've run through we call it like the running it out portion of the Texas method, where you've run everything down to singles, and you kind of have like more or less a 1RM established, right? And then you can kind of add weight every other week from that point. So that's where I'd like you to be, right? If you're at that point and you're still, pushing 30% body fat, maybe it's a good idea to try to slim down a little bit, right? If you're at that point and you're like 23, 24% for a guy, it's probably not that bad. You can probably just stay there, continue to get stronger. You're going to recomp and lean out, right? So if you're not already, if you're feeling like you're bordering on like, kind of overweight, obese, then that's a good time to cut, right? But otherwise, get your strength up. Like I said before, that's the most important factor. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about, well, as a big portion of the video, I'm going to talk about how to program and get stronger while you're in a calorie deprived state. All right, nutrition, obviously very important, as we learned in the previous video. The nutrition factor of cutting is very, very simple, right? You gotta be in a calorie deficit. Notice I have a little period right there. Okay, calorie deficit, oh, that's better. All right, calorie deficit, period, all right? You gotta be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. No way around it. That's all I'm gonna say about that. All right, there's a bunch of different ways to accomplish that, as you can see by the next bullet point. Thousands of ways to do so, right? Different diets. We got low carb, we got low fat, We got if it fits your macros. We got if. We got carb cycling. We got all this different stuff. All these different strategies, right? My recommendation is you should pick one that works for you very well, and then try another one, and then perhaps another after that, right? That's correct. I think you should have an arsenal of fat loss strategies, and I'll give you an example, right? So let's say it's a normal day for me. I'm going to be at Starting Strength Boston all day, right? I'm pretty much in control of my diet for the entire day. I can pack food the night before. I weigh it out. I know exactly what I'm eating. I can literally the night before I will plan my food for the next day. Then I'll weigh it all out, prepare it. That way I have it for the next day, with the exception of one meal that I cook, but I also plan to weigh that one out, right? So I know exactly what I'm going to eat the next day. There's no curveballs coming in. I'm like, all right, I have this amount of calories. I'm going to hit that. Very, very straightforward, right? But that's not always the case. I don't do that 365 days a year. Sometimes I have a Saturday where I'm gonna go to my girlfriend's brother's birthday party or something like that, right? And we're gonna go out to dinner. And then in the morning, I'm gonna be at the gym working, not training. I'm gonna be working on Saturday. Then I have to go home and shower, and then I'm going straight to there. So I can't really control my food that well, maybe for half the day, right? So on that day, maybe what I'll do is instead of, eating what I normally eat, which I prefer to eat kind of throughout the day, smaller meals. Instead of doing that, I might practice a little bit of if, right? I might not eat until later in the day. That way I can kind of consolidate my calories a little bit. So I'll eat closer to noontime or something, right? Go home, take my shower, maybe have a snack, and then I'll go to the restaurant. And then that way I'm afforded a larger meal. Because I know at the restaurant, whatever I get is going to have a bunch of calories, right? Because you can't really control for that. Every restaurant, they put olive oil and butter and all this other crap in the food. So it's going to be high calories, right? So I'm going to save most of my calories for that point. I'm going to sacrifice a bit earlier in the day and then do that, right? Another example, sometimes on the weekend, I'm generally just less hungry in general, even when I'm cutting. If I'm not training, if it's not a training day, I just tend to not get as hungry. So sometimes I'll implement a little bit of IF there, right? Wait until I'm hungry and then eat something. I'll kind of use the if it fits your macros a little bit, right? So I'll try to hit my protein goals, and then kind of outside of that, whatever I have available in the house, I'll just kind of, cook that. If I have some rice or some grains or something, I have that around. Make a little bit of Dave's Killer Bread. Fries up real nice in the cast iron, very delicious. Recommend trying that if you haven't. But basically experiment with different things, because different things are going to work for different people. If you are all about carbs, right? Eat a lot of carbs. If you're all about fats, you like the more keto style of stuff. Don't go keto. Don't cut your carbs out. You need some. But, you can err more on the low carb, high fat side of things. Eat a lot of nuts if that's your thing. But yeah. And then keep in mind, tying in with this next point, the only essential macronutrients are protein, the amino acids in the protein, and then also omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. The EPA and DHA are the fish oils, and the linoleic acid, the omega-6, right? So you got to get those in from your diet. There are no essential carbs, so you theoretically don't have to eat carbs to stay alive and function properly, but you're going to function a lot better with some. So don't cut them entirely, like I said. But make sure that you do have enough protein and enough omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, because you do need those to function. And your functioning will suffer without them, and your body can't produce them on its own. Right? Protein, obviously very important. Everybody knows that. When you're cutting, keep your protein where it is, right? Maybe even increase it a little bit. Don't drop it. All right? Even if in some circumstances you have to drop it. If you're obese, let's say you're 5'7" and you're 300 pounds, right? Then you should probably eat 200 grams of protein. But in general, 1 gram per pound of body weight, if let's say you're 5'7" and you're 220 and you're 32% body fat, right? Then I wouldn't go lower than 200, but you could probably eat 200 instead of 220, right? So you can kind of shoot more towards your target body weight. But if you're 5'7" and 200, you're trying to go to 180, then probably keep your protein at 200 as you're doing that. Don't cut your protein to 180, right? Um, what else was I going to say about protein? Spreading it throughout the day is probably a good idea if you're able to do that, because your body doesn't have a mechanism to store protein, right? It's going to use it. It's going to use it not just for building muscle, but also just for general processes within the body. It's going to build, new hair, skin, nails, stuff, whatever anything in your body that is made of physical stuff. It basically uses protein to do that. So protein's never a bad thing. There's never like wasted protein. And then if you even overeat a little bit beyond what you need to build stuff, it's just going to use it for energy. So protein is also very satiating, right? All the reason to eat more. What else? Protein has a high thermic effect, meaning that you burn a lot of calories when you're eating the protein. So that's really good. Another thing I forgot to write down here, but I'd recommend, is try to limit your liquid calories, so like protein shakes and stuff like that, unless you're just someone that has a pretty low appetite generally, or if you just like to torture yourself. But yeah, that's about it for protein. One thing I forgot to mention about the thousands of ways to cut is the amount of the calorie deficit. Talk about that right now. Just cycle right on up here again. So the calorie deficit, right? There's different sizes of calorie deficit you can approach, right? So you could do a 500 calorie deficit, which is pretty standard, and then you're going to lose about a pound per week, right? And if you're going to do that, you're better off sustaining it for a longer period of time generally, so that you can lose the amount of weight that you need to lose. You can also get more aggressive with your fat loss if you want. You could do 1,000 calorie deficit, right? That's going to be about 2 pounds of fat per week, right? Sounds fine and dandy. If I could lose 2 pounds instead of 1 pound, why not do that? Well, a couple of reasons why not. One reason is because the greater your calorie deficit, the less energy you're going to have, the more your training is going to suffer, which is imperative, as I said before. The other thing is the larger your calorie deficit, the leaner you get, you're going to start to lose tissue. For, like I said, regular MFs, if you're like 30% body fat, you're not going to lose lean tissue by eating 1,000 calorie deficit, probably, unless you do it for too long. But you're probably not going to be able to do it for very long. That's the other drawback. If you're doing a very restrictive calorie deficit, you got to keep it to a short period of time. So I've tried both out personally. I did like a long, well, not that long. It was like 12 weeks. The general recommendation too is like don't go longer than like 12 weeks in a diet. But I did like a pretty standard 12-week calorie deficit of like 300 to 500. So pretty moderate, pretty manageable, and it's very sustainable to do it that way, right? Like I wasn't very hungry throughout it. I was able to sustain it. It's pretty steady. It works very well. The downside to that is that it kind of takes a long time. Your training is like slightly. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's like that expression. It just kind of is annoying, right? You just kind of want to get it over with. So I personally kind of do prefer to go into a larger deficit if I need it. And like I think I'm done with my cutting at this point unless I fuck up and get too fat again. But in general, like, when I am in that state and I have to cut down, I prefer to just, get it over with more quickly. So I'll do something where it's like a very large deficit for like 1 to 3 weeks at a time. So no longer than that. 1 to 3 weeks, and then like 1 or 2 weeks back at maintenance, kind of like, let my hormones level out, let my hunger signaling level out, all that. So you can get kind of crazy and ravenous when you're eating calorie deprived for a long time. But yeah, so you can either go slow and steady, you can go fast and aggressive, but you have to take frequent breaks. There's a video that Lane Norton does on this. I think he called it like fat loss sprints. He compares it to running. That's a phenomenal analogy. It's like you can either, jog the whole mile, or you can like sprint, walk a little bit, sprint, walk a little bit, and you're still going to get there in the same amount of time either way, really. It's just kind of what is more entertaining for you, what you prefer. I think I just had another thought, and I lost it. Something else that was important that I want to talk about. Length of the diet, calories, time off from the diet. That's always important, taking time off from the diet. If it's 12 weeks, give yourself some time to kind of get back into a healthy maintenance routine. And also, honestly, something that I did with the most recent cut was I kind of established my maintenance first. So it was like the first like 3 or 4 weeks of the cut, I wasn't even cutting at all. I just kind of established like where my calories were going to be and the behaviors that I was going to implement once I got down to my goal weight. Keep my what's it called? Keep my calories kind of steady. Figure out the nutrients and the foods that I like to eat, right? And then kind of get those dialed in. And then I went into the cut from there and just kind of reduced that overall. Oh yeah, that's what I want to talk about. So when you're in the calorie reduced state, health is not a concern because you're doing the whole reason you're doing this is to get healthier by reducing your body fat, right? And so if you have to you're not going to be able to eat all of your essential foods and nutrients and whatnot. Like if you're concerned, I had this conversation with myself when I was doing the aggressive diet, and I'm like trying to fit in like monounsaturated fats and like almonds and like olive oil and shit so that I could have like a more healthy cutting diet. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'm eating like in 1,000 calorie deficit, which is already unhealthy. So I may as well commit to that and do it in a way that I can sustain and get through. So it's like I'm not going to waste 100 calories on almonds, which like honestly I don't like them that much, but they're good for you. So that's kind of why I eat them. But if I'm gonna already be eating only like 2,000 calories a day, then I'm gonna use it on stuff that I like to eat, and that is gonna keep me. You want foods that are gonna keep you full, obviously. So what I did was like I'd eat like foods that I like salmon and beef, but then I would only eat like fibrous vegetables with it. So like I would basically cut out the carbs except for around the workout. That's also important with your carb timing. Obviously, like I said, carbs are important. So if you can bias most of your carbs around the workout when you're cutting, most to all of them, honestly. So like, let's say you only have 100 carbs for the day. Like optimal would be 50 carbs in the morning, or well, assuming you train in the morning, 50 carbs in the morning before the workout, then you train, then you have your other 50 grams after the workout, or you could even do like 75 before, 25 after. That sort of thing, right? So you have the carbs to fuel the workout, and then you have the carbs afterwards to replenish your glycogen, which you don't really lose that much of through strength training, honestly. I think that's a little overblown. You don't need like 300 grams of carbs after your workout. All right, and then the last piece right here, multivitamin, right, with a question mark, because apparently you can become vitamin deficient when you're cutting because you're getting fewer nutrients overall. That all makes sense. Again, I don't think that's very relevant for people that have higher body fat percentages, right? You're probably gonna be fine. I think it's more of a concern as you're getting leaner. But if it makes you feel better, you can like take a multivitamin. I've never really, honestly, I don't even really know like what the symptoms of vitamin deficiency are. I've never experienced them personally or like was aware of it, or rather, I would say it's not. If I did experience vitamin deficiency, it was not so profound that I was like, something is definitely wrong with me. It's like maybe you're like a little low energy or you have like a headache or something, right? It's not that huge of a deal. Get over it. All right. Training. Most important part. The core principles. First principles. They still apply, right? We still want to get stronger. Strength is still the most important thing. If you lose strength, you lose muscle, right? If you're gaining strength, you're gaining muscle. If you're maintaining strength, you're keeping all your muscle while you're getting lighter and losing body fats. That's the goal, right? We want to either gain or maintain our strength. And there are a lot of different ways to do that through training, which we'll talk about in a second. But you can't separate strength from body composition, as I talked about in the nutrition body comp video. If you've been training for strength, that's great, right? You're already most of the way there. Like I said, you shouldn't really be cutting unless you have an immediate health concern, unless you're already, to a certain point in your training, like I said before. So recovery is impacted, right? Duh. So you got to consider that. Stress recovery adaptation. You're stressing yourself with the strength training workout. You have less recovery than you did when you were eating enough calories, because now you're eating fewer calories. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Keeping your protein high is going to mitigate a lot of that, right? Because then you're still... The simplest way to think about the macros is like protein is the recovery macro, carbs is like the fuel macro, right? Kind of fuels the workout. And then fat is kind of like a happiness macro, right? Keeps you happy. No, you have essential fats, those are important. And then fats are important for like hormone production and that sort of thing. All right, multiple approaches to maintaining and improving your strength, right? These are the goodies right here, the gold, the keys to the castle, right? How the heck do you lose weight, right? You're cutting, and you either maintain your strength or ideally get stronger, right? And I will say, getting stronger while cutting is actually quite common and quite feasible if you do it properly, right? And like I said, if you are at about the level of training advancement that I described, like let's say you just ran out your triples, doubles, singles, right? You were making weekly progress. You just finished that up. Now you decide you're going to cut. Great time to start doing it. The later down the road you start cutting, right, then the less likely it is that you get stronger during it. But if you kind of start around that point, you can still, make some gains during the cut, provided that you're programming properly, right? So, also if you're in the novice phase, right, then you're still going to make pretty good progress by cutting. But I recommend not cutting as a novice unless, again, immediate health concern. Very important. All right, multiple approaches to cutting. We got auto-regulation as the common thread between all of them, right? If you're going to cut, auto-regulation is imperative. Basically, what that means is you need to be able to be flexible and kind of make changes on the fly because things are not going to go as expected. Things are a lot less predictable, right? A lot less linear at this point. If you're cutting, your training is already becoming less linear as you're advancing. And then when you're cutting, you're basically making yourself more artificially advanced. That's kind of how I like to think about it, right? So the simplest approach to programming is just keep doing whatever you were doing, and then knowing that you're cutting now, just kind of treat yourself as if you're a little bit more advanced. So if you were adding weight to the bar once a week, and then you start cutting, start adding weight to the bar every other week, right? Now, if you're at the end of the once a week, right, and you're going into the once every other week, then that's probably not going to last as long, right? Let's say if you're doing like sets of 5, for example, and you're still adding weight to the bar once a week, so you're doing the squat, you're doing the classic like Texas method setup, so you're doing one set of 5, which I don't necessarily recommend, by the way. But if you're doing that, you're doing one set of 5, and then you're adding 5 pounds every week, doing another set of 5, right? Best way to think about that is just keep doing that. Add one set of 5, and just expect that you're probably going to go down to 2 triples sooner than you would otherwise, right? So you're just going to advance more quickly. So you keep doing what you're doing, go down to 2 triples. That's probably going to last, a short amount of time. Like I said, go down to your doubles, go down to your singles, right? So you can just keep doing the same thing and just run through it. It's just going to be shortened compared to if you were eating enough calories. The biggest mistake people make a lot when they're cutting, and I've made myself, is you just immediately anticipate that you're going to be weaker, which is not necessarily the case, especially if you're carrying extra body fat and you're in the too fluffy category, right? You can probably still gain strength just fine while shedding that body fat. So yeah, basically just keep doing what you're doing and just anticipate that things might slow down at some point, but don't expect them to slow down right away. Like stick to the plan, keep milking the gains that you got, right? So when things do kind of go to shit, all right, so let's say you run out your singles, like you did the calorie deficit, you did one set of 5, you started cutting, and that lasted for like 3 more weeks, right? You got a good bit of progress there. Then you went to 2 triples, and then you only got like 2 weeks out of that, right? You went to 3 doubles, and then you got 3 doubles 1 week, and then the very next week you did, let's say you failed on the first double, so you did 1 rep, and then you failed the second one. So then you knock out, however many singles on that week, and you're like, well, fuck, I'm not going to get 5 singles next week. Maybe you go to the next week, and you knock out 1 single, right? And then you kind of go to the next phase, and then you start adding weight to the bar every other week, and then you continue from there, right? So you can see you're still making progress. You go to every other week, you keep doing that, then maybe you go to once every 3rd week, and then eventually you're on once every 4th week, right? So you're still adding weight to the bar. It's just you're just slowing down your progress. You're making your phases are not lasting as long as they should because you're eating less, right? Which is fine. That's going to happen when you're eating less. So just that's what you should expect to happen. That's a good way to approach your programming, right? Other options, depending on the type of person. So there are factors to consider when you keep intensity very high and you're in a calorie deficit, right? Some people, the risk of injury might increase if it's a particularly strong person. I found that with some guys I've trained, there's only really one example I can think of right now, a guy that I trained that has worked pretty well. But if you're strong enough, it can work. So like if you're, squatting in like the high 4s, maybe like deadlifting in the 5s, that sort of thing, and then you decide to cut, You can kind of take the high rep approach. So if you guys know Robert Santana, excellent coach, has a great podcast, the Weights and Plates podcast. He's talked about this on his podcast a whole lot, where he uses this for himself too, where he'll do like sets of 10 to start with, and then he'll go down to like sets of 8, and then sets of 5, right? So as he's cutting, he just kind of does like 10 rep PRs, 8 rep PRs, 5 rep PRs, and a straight linear periodization on a weekly model. So it's like, let's say your 1 rep max is 500 for the squat, and then you would start your, your linear high rep progress. You do 365 for 10, right? And then if that like flies, you can make a couple 10-pound jumps off the start. Eventually go to 5-pound jumps. Let's say you get to 390, you fail a rep, right? You fail on rep 9 or whatever. Then you do 395. I think I said 390. So you just add 5 pounds, 395, do a set of 8 there, right? Keep running that up. And then you can run that down to 5s. And then, hopefully you don't get too far away from your peak while you're doing that. And then you can kind of go back to more of an LP once you bring your calories back up and kind of work back up to where you were. That works for guys that are, really strong and might get more beat up and more fatigued by the amount of weight that they're lifting. If you're squatting, like 365 to 405 or even like 450, you probably don't need to do that. You're probably better off just continuing to push your strength up and staying near your peak, especially as a regular MF, like I said. Also, it helps that that guy is like reasonably athletic that I was talking about. So athleticism plays a part there too. So if you're a regular dude, not that athletic, not that strong in terms of the absolute load, right? Then it's a better idea to keep your intensity high, stay closer to your peak, because you're not going to have the same issues that they're going to have maintaining that performance, and it's going to be more beneficial for you to do so, right? Another way to do it, this is like an Andy Baker technique, is you can run what he calls a rotating linear progression, I believe it's called. So the way to do that is basically you take like your 5 rep, so you just pick a rep range to start with. Let's say you're going to do 5 reps, right? That's like your floor, and then, or I guess your ceiling in terms of the load, but that's the lowest number of reps is 5. And let's say you're going to do like 5 reps for the range. So the highest number of reps is 10 reps, right? So you're going to do, for your first workout, you're going to start at 10 reps, and then you're going to keep adding weight to the bar and work your way all the way down to 5 reps. And then once you like fail a rep and go down to 4, then you kind of restart, add weight, and go back through again. So for example, if your 5 rep squat PR is 365, right? Then you would do, let's say you like time out the length of the diet. So you're going to do a 12-week diet, and you're like, I'd be totally happy if I can just maintain my strength by the end of the diet, right? And so you say, I want to hit 365 for 5 in the 12th week of this diet, okay? So you're going to do that, and then you're just going to back up 12 weeks from that, right? So you can do 5-pound jumps, you can do 10-pound jumps. We'll do 10 for the sake of math. So you're going to back up 120 pounds from 365. So you're going to start at 245, and you're going to do sets of 10. So you can do 3 sets of 10, you can do 1 set of 10. I think his method is actually you do like 1 set of 10, and then you do back offs after that. So like it's really just one all-out set, and then you do some volume after that, like just a little bit. You don't want to do too much volume because you're cutting, and you don't want to get beat up. But you're just going to do 1 really heavy all-out set, and then you're just going to add weight regardless of what happens. So you're going to do 245 for 10, and then you're going to add 10 pounds to that regardless of what happens, right? So you're going to keep doing that for a while. So you do 255 for 10, 265 for 10, 275 for 10. Let's say you get all the way to like 315. So you did 305 for 10. It was starting to get really slow. It was getting really sketchy. And you're like, all right, I want to do 315 for 10 this week. And you go and you give it all you got, and you get 315 and you get 9 and fail in the last rep, right? But you gave it all you got. That's fine. The following week, we're still going to add 10 pounds, all right? Stick to the plan. But you're not going to do 10 anymore, obviously. You're just going to get as many as you can get again. So let's say the following week you do 325 for 8, and then you do 335 for 7, and then 345 for 6, right? And then 355 for 5. And then in the last week of the diet, you get back to 365, and then hopefully you get at least 5, right? If you get more than 5, then you increase your strength. If you get 5 again, then you maintained your strength, and then if you get 4, then you only lost like a tiny bit of strength. So again, I don't really recommend that one as much because you have to come so far off your peak. And then if you're not increasing the stress over time, which you're not if you're decreasing the load that much, right? It just kind of messes up your programming. Then that's not going to work that well. But it can work for certain people and for certain lifts too. You could do it for like upper body lifts, like the bench, for example, but just do smaller jumps, like 5-pound jumps, especially if your bench is a little bit stronger. So if you do like 275 and you say you do it for a shorter period of time, so let's say it's like 6 weeks, right? So you take off 30 pounds from 275, you do, and let's say 275 is your 5-rep PR. So you do 245, right? 245 for a set of 10, and then you run that up 5 pounds at a time, same thing. Hopefully you get back up to 275 for 5 within 6 weeks, right? If you get more, you get stronger. If you get the same, you get the same amount of strength. You guys get the idea, right? All right, so how I would program personally is the first thing that I said, which is just you treat yourself like you're, advancing more quickly. So you just keep doing the same thing, adding weight to the bar. And then once things get a little bit sus, right? Like once you're not sure if you can plan the PR or not, which is going to happen pretty quickly, probably once you're on like every 2 to 3 weeks or so, maybe even if you're lucky, it'll be once every 4 weeks. Then you can implement a range for your lifts, right? So let's say that you're doing like a volume day for squat and it's a 3x5, right? And let's say that you're squatting, like let's say you did like 315 for 3 sets of 5 the previous week. And then the following week, you're like, man, that 315 for 3 sets of 5 is pretty grindy. I don't know if I can get all 3 sets of 5 at 320. So you give yourself a range, right? And it doesn't matter what the percentage is. Just don't make it too big, right? You don't want to come more than like 5 to 10% off your peak, I would say. So you do like a 5 to 10% range. Let's do 10%. So let's say you have 320, and then you back off 30 pounds from that. Well, not back off, but you set a range 30 pounds from that. So it's 290 to 320. And then you come in the following week, and then you kind of have to decide where in the range you're going to go. So if you feel like shit and you feel like you're not going to get all 3 at the top weight, then you go ahead and you do, wherever inside that range you're feeling. If you feel awful and you didn't sleep well and you're in a, stupid steep calorie deficit, then do 290 for 3 sets of 5. Just take that, come back the following week, try to improve on that. Once you get all 3 sets at the top of the range, then you move the range up, right? So this requires a little bit of skill. It requires, like I said, that you are at a certain level of training advancement because you have to have trained yourself to the point where you kind of have a better idea of where your limits are and you're not afraid to push yourself pretty hard. Because these sets are still supposed to be hard, even on the lower end of the range days. Like they should never be like they're just blowing through them. It's just easy. If you took the low end of the range and you just blew through it, then it probably just wasn't heavy enough and you just kind of didn't push yourself hard enough. So, and there's different indicators you can look at if you're doing that. Like if it's your volume day instead of your heavy day, for example, you can like impose restrictions. And this is very much like the conjugate method now. But you could say like, I'm going to do a box squat for 3 sets of 5. And that way it's going to keep it from getting too heavy, for example, right? Because the box is self-limiting. Or you could say like, I'm going to use a different self-limiting factor like rest time. So you could say like, I'm going to do 3 sets of 5 and I'm only allowed to rest 5 minutes between sets. So if I can't get all 3 sets in with a 5-minute rest, then it's just too heavy, right? So let's say I can do 305 with a 5-minute rest. I feel good about that. Go for that, hit it. Once you get 320, 3 sets of 5, 5-minute rest, then you bump the range up to 325. And so instead of like 290 to 320, it'd be 295, 325, right? But that's pretty much what I recommend. I don't recommend RPE. I don't recommend RIR. Basically the same thing. But, you can always like, I don't have a problem with you finishing a set and being like, speculating to how many reps you could have done. I think that can be useful in some scenarios, especially if you like, let's say you did like a set of 8 the prior week, right? And then you do like a set of 7 and you fail the 8th rep, and then you go straight to 5s after that. And then you're like, well, if I know that I could have done, you add 5 pounds from that, right? So you did like the set of 7, you had 5. So then you know that you just did 7 reps, 5 pounds less. So you're like, you definitely could do 6 and you're pretty sure you could do 7, right? So that's like your, RPE 8.5 or whatever. So like, it's fine to think about that, but don't program based off of that. Don't say like, I'm going to do a set at RPE 8.5, but that way it kind of gives you some data. So that way, how many reps you have in the tank more or less. Well, you never know for sure, obviously, but like you have an idea. And then as you're adding weight to the bar, then you kind of have a little bit more of an idea what to expect for how long things are going to last, right? So it's like, let's say your tens lasted 4 weeks, and then your eights lasted 4 weeks, and then you got seven one week, and then you go to fives, and it's like, all right, this is probably going to last like 4 or 5 weeks maybe. Um, but yeah, when you're cutting, I also don't think it's a bad idea to be a little bit preemptive, a little bit cautious with the programming changes. So don't wait until you fail a rep. I would say like get to the point where you're like, I'm not really sure if I can do that final rep on this next week, and then just kind of don't push that final rep because like I said, when you're cutting, the risk for injury is a little bit higher. You have less ATP. You're just you're getting used to new leverage, right? So you're still going to get stronger. Like you don't want to just back the weight off, but like make the change as far as like either if it's every, let's say you go from biweekly to every 3 weeks, like make the change as soon as that like biweekly is like a real grind and you're like, I'm not sure if I can get another PR in 2 weeks, but I could definitely get it in 3 weeks, then make that change. Because this is not the time where you're trying to like hit massive PRs, right? You're just trying to, if you maintain your strength while you're losing 10 or 20 pounds of body weight, like that's a huge win, right? That's the gold standard, essentially. If you're not trying to add 30 pounds to your squat while losing 20 pounds of body weight. Like that's awesome if you do it, but that's not what you're trying to do. So keep the big picture in perspective, right? We're trying to, the floor is like you maintain your strength while you're losing body weight, right? And then anything above that, like you're playing with house money at that point. So don't get too crazy. That's what I'm trying to say. All right. If there's anything I did not encompass in this all-encompassing video, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you'd like me to touch on in the next one. I probably won't do another cutting video. I feel like I covered most of what is relevant in this video. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Say something in the comments, like the video, share it with your friends, and I'll see you guys next time, all right? Peace.